Morning everyone, it's that time. It's books again. Books. Four to share with you. I haven't had the time to read as much as I'd like, and I do get a bit niggly when I haven't read. Now then, this one. This is Marple. It's 12 short stories by 12 writers in the genre of Marple. So they're writing Miss Marple stories, and it was hit and miss. A couple of them I absolutely loved. I was completely there. I was, in St Mary Mead or with Miss Marple, and it was so Christy. I loved it. Others, they just missed it. It just didn't feel... Miss Marple stories to me are like putting on a nice, comfy pair of socks or a cardi. I love a cardigan. And some of them, no. It was like I was searching the wardrobe for my comfy cardi and I couldn't find it. And then a couple of them, as I say, they were just so Marple. It was wonderful. It felt like a Sunday afternoon with a hot chocolate and just cozied up, and I loved it. So definitely a hit and miss. I'm kind of torn about this need to write in that style, and you get them. I mean, the James Bond continue with other writers, the Marple continue, the Christies have continued with other writers. I don't know how I feel about it. Sometimes I think it's lovely to keep taking it forward, but it's also, can we not just cherish what we have? And it's never going to be exactly the same. But yeah, it was okay, but I did just feel some of them, you really just missed the point. Or the writer was trying to modernise Marple in a way. And the whole point of Marple is that she isn't. That's what's beautiful about the Marple stories, is it is a time that we will never understand because we've not lived it. But I like the cozy aspect of Marple, and it frustrates me when people try and change that. But it was okay. I kind of enjoyed the short story aspect. I'm not usually a fan of short stories. I like to get really in there in the story, but I actually did like these, and I quite liked the one thing it worked well with is what Krista did well, which was the start, the middle and the end. And I quite like the fact that you got a solution very quickly rather than it dragging out. I quite enjoyed that. But yeah, it was okay. If you like Christy and Marple, it might be worth a read. Like me, you may find some of the stories were really good. I'm just a bit torn about how I feel about this need to sort of keep resurrecting and writing as. But yes, Marple, 12 new stories, and it's 12 writers. For instance, Kate Moss, there's Val McDermott, Ellie Griffiths, Ruth Ware, Jean Kwok, Natalie Haynes, to name but a few. Marple. Now this one I do try and bring out in October. I know it's sad, but I do. Do you have books that just fit certain months? Do you read A Christmas Carol at Christmas? And I have this, which is Alice Hoffman, Practical Magic. Now, a lot of you are probably very familiar with the film, which I love. Sandra Bullock, Nicole Kidman, Stockard Channing, Diane Weiss or Weiss, and it's witchcraft, good, bad, evil, love, death, magic, witches, fabulous. Now, the book, you recognise, if you read this, you'd go, oh yeah. It's not set out as the film. So, chronologically, the film starts in the past and moves us forward, where this, you get the past further into the book. But this is a lot darker. It's not as whimsical as the film. It's a lot darker. It's a lot more about the sisters, their relationships. It's not entirely based at the home of the old aunts where it is in the film. it's not as romanticized as the film, but I love it. I just love the writing. I love the quirkiness of it. It's a beautiful read, but again, like a lot of film books, you know, they've pulled and played with it, put it in a mixing bowl and made it a little bit more palate friendly in a way that it's just more, you know, almost Disney-esque. Once you've read the book, you realise how different they are, but I love reading it, and I really love this cover as well. So Practical Magic, Alice Hoffman. There are 3 others in this series, by the way. I only have this one. I've not read the other 3, but there are 3 others. Now this one, I absolutely loved, and I feel really bad saying I loved it for many, many reasons. So Jade Fitton, she's a journalist. She's written for newspapers, magazines, and she's from Cornwall, Devon, Cornwall, my neck of the woods, and it's called Hermit. A memoir of finding freedom in a wild place. Now, Jade, it starts with her in this relationship where domestic violence is just the done thing, basically. She deals with the most horrific kind of domestic violence, where she's hospitalised and just degraded and mentally and physically and emotionally abused. And she keeps going back. And it deals with that question of why doesn't she just leave? And how hard it is to judge any relationship unless you're in it. But she's with this awful man who promises to do better, and when it's good, and when it's bad, it's horrific. And he just keeps getting back into his old ways. And eventually they leave London and they rent this place in Devon. And he leaves a few weeks later for a job. And finally, she can breathe. Finally, she doesn't have to worry about what she's going to say, doesn't have to worry that she's going to trigger him. She's constantly sort of saying things in her mind before she says it out loud to consciously make sure that she's not saying the wrong thing. She's on eggshells the whole time, and you feel it. You feel this claustrophobia, you feel this panic. You feel almost shallow breathing when you're reading it, because you really feel her fear. And he leaves, and she's got all this freedom, and this freedom to just go out, and nobody's waiting for her when she gets home. She doesn't have to account for herself. She has nobody to answer to. If she wants to go out and walk in the rain for an hour, she can. She hasn't got somebody waiting at home thinking that she's been having a secret meeting, that she's having an affair. She has all this freedom, and the descriptions of just being out there, and you've nothing to fear from the outside. It's people you have to fear, not the trees, just wildlife. Her descriptions are amazing. Now, she does write a lot of poetry, and it shows. And when she gains her freedom, you kind of also breathe and take in this world that she lives in. And it's just her story as she moves around, finding places that give her life. And a lot of those places are bleak. There aren't a lot of people around. But it's just the most enriching and beautifully poetic story, as hard as the topics are that she deals with. And she's very honest, she's very graphic, but you're so invested in her, and her writing, as I say, is poetry in motion. It really is. But it's a happy story. You get the happy ending, and I absolutely loved it. I can't recommend it enough. Hermit, Jade Anglice Fitton. Now this one, I'm a fan of the author. I've read several of her books, and I'm a huge lover. I mentioned it on my book videos. When I was at school, at primary school, there was a book that was read to us that just transfixed me, and I was obsessed with it, and I reread it. It's a real easy book, The Ghost of Thomas Kemp, and it was written by Penelope Lively, who writes for children and adults. Another one of my favourites of hers is a book called The Photograph. But this, I don't know why I've never read it, Moon Tiger. And Moon Tiger is a a story about Claudia, and it's basically this. Claudia is in hospital. She's a very old lady and she knows she's dying, and it's not chronological. It's her dipping in and out of her past to her present. So currently she's in hospital. Her daughter visits, a lodger that she's got this friendship with visits, her sister-in-law visits her, but then you revisit her life as a child with her brother, and the relationship there is interesting. They're both so full of confidence and ego, and they're both so narcissistic and so competitive. I mean, you know, they literally injure each other in achieving what they want to achieve, and yet they can't see anybody better than themselves, to the point that they can't imagine being with other people. So they have a relationship that is incestuous in parts of the story. And so you travel back and forth with Claudia, and she's a very difficult person to like. You know, she has this daughter who clearly, you know, she cares for her, but it's almost that she don't take that step forward and actually love her and show her love. And she seems to much prefer the lodger and the eccentricity, and she's very independent and she's very confident, as I said, very confident as a woman of her sexuality. And you do struggle to sort of find anything to like about her. And also it affects her daughter. The other thing is, it's how people perceive us. So how her daughter sees her mother, but she also doesn't know her mother's story. And there is things that happened in the past during the Second World War that have really made her the woman that she is and behave in many ways as she is. Also her upbringing. Her father died in the First World War. She can barely remember her father. She has a brief recollection of being on a man's shoulders. She has a mother who's very sort of not present, as in mentally she's sort of away, just dreaming away in the distance. She's not a very sort of hands-on mother. There's not a lot of affection there. And the mother is very different to, you know, her children. And that's where her brother and her form a very close friendship and beyond that. But what was interesting was I was sort of reading the book thinking, well, I don't like her. The description of her during the Second World War, where she's a journalist and she gets herself into places and she's reporting back and meeting all sorts of people, the locals affected by war and people who didn't want to be part of the war, but because of where their country, you know, lies, inevitably they've been brought into it, and also dealing with, you know, meeting the soldiers and everything else. It draws you in. But what I found really interesting was I was sort of thinking, oh, I just don't know. I kept reading it, I just don't know. And then the last sort of quarter of the book, I really connected with Claudia. And when I got to the end, I kind of felt I want to reread this again within the next month, because I really want to sort of, I feel like I understand her now, that I want to reread and relive her story with a different thought process and a different heart for her. Almost that I judged her too harshly. And it's quite profound, the effect it has, because I've never really thought I want to do better by a character. It's just a story. And yet I really felt I owed it to Claudia to reread it and yet form a different opinion almost of it. So, I mean, credit to Penelope Lively that she really she worked my emotions so much. I felt just total disinterest at the start and kind of, oh, right, yeah, and oh, what awful people. And also the people she comes across as well. But in the end, you kind of, yeah, you know, there's something about her that's quite engaging. So I loved it, yet I didn't. It's a quandary of a book, but I will reread it because I feel I need to do that. I need to reread it knowing how I feel now. So that's Moon Tiger by Penelope Lively. And of course, what I forgot to is she's a historian. So basically, she's kind of giving you the history of her life as she remembers it. And I love the fact it's not, I was born, I was this, I was that. It does pass back and forth, and I quite like when stories do that, that you get the current day and then you get the past. And these, you know, you have a sister-in-law visiting her who is nothing like the person you'd expect her brother to marry, but almost like he just settles for this woman. And everybody also picks up on this relationship with the brother, that there's something not quite, they don't know what it is, but there's something. So yes, Moon Tiger, my quandary book, but ultimately Penelope Lively does it again. I love it in a huge sense. I do love it. And those are my books. I've got another 2 actually. I've got 3 on the go. I've got a Colossus book, which I dip in and out of, and then I'm on to 2 at the moment. So there will be another book video as we clatter ever onward into the end of the year. Can't believe it. But I will leave it there. Thank you for your lovely comments, for staying in touch, for recommending authors and books. If anybody's interested, we're in November on BBC 2 Tuesday evenings, but you can watch it on iPlayer, BBC iPlayer, Between the Covers with Sarah Fox, half an hour where you get actors and comedians and performers talking about what they read. I'd like to see them have they have authors on talking about the books that they're discussing, but I'd like to see authors actually sitting in the circle and talking about what they read. I think we need less of a sort of publicity tour, because inevitably you get the one actor or comedian who's on basically to plug their book. The first week we had Richard Armitage, who's a great actor. He was plugging his book. We've had Graham Norton before, who's plugging his. You know, and I know that's the process, but it would be lovely. Ade Edmondson talking about his book. It would be lovely to just have book talk without feeling it's sort of a sales pitch. Let me know if you watch the programme. But I can recommend it, and I do love book programmes. That's it. I'll leave it there. Take care, and I'll be back soon with a book video at some point. Bye for now.